All right, Numbers chapter 6. This is just that idea of the blessing. And I'm looking at it today in the sense of it being the king's blessing. The blessing of the king. That's why so much of the music was focused on that. But looking at this one again, it says, again Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to Aaron and to his sons, saying, Thus you are to bless Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, by saying to them, Adonai bless you and keep you. Adonai make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. Adonai turn his face toward you and grant you shalom. And in this way they are to place my name over Bnei Israel, and so I will bless them. When you look in this section, we were talking about this a bit last night, in this Torah portion, it's right here at the end of chapter 6 and the beginning of chapter 7. We were talking about why is it here in this location, in this spot? Does he all of a sudden just interrupt what he's talking about and jump into this blessing? It's just after all of that discussion of the Nazirite vow, but it's also before all of the offerings of the tribes and the dedication of the altar. So, and you think, we were talking about, well, which section is this supposed to go with? And really, the answer is both. The answer is both. Because to the individual Nazirite, the blessing comes to the one who is obedient to the vow that they have made. They fulfill the vow that they have made to the Lord, and there is blessing that comes. Your name, his name is written, spoken over you at the end, and when you finish and complete your vow, because where do you have to go? The Nazirite has to go to the altar, essentially. Go before the Kohen, go before him in order to make his offering and to be verified by the Kohen that he has done what he has said he was going to do. And so then at that point there would be this blessing that could be spoken over him. So the Kohen is thus in a position to bless the one who has fulfilled his vow and brought his offering. Of course, the next section is the same thing, just not on an individual level, but it's there as a corporate level. To the sons of Israel, the Bnei Israel, they are bringing their offerings for the dedication of the altar. When they camp up as in their tribes and such, they have their banners, right? They're all supposed to line up behind their banners, and they come before him, tribe by tribe. So each tribe is coming before the Lord, fulfilling its commitment to the dedication of the altar. Each one is coming, they're sending their representative, their prince, and fulfilling their role in obedience. So every tribe is coming with their banner, with all that stuff, presenting themselves before Adonai and the priest, and they verify that their offerings are acceptable. So the Kohen is, again, in a position to bless each tribe and place his name, the name of the Lord, the name of Adonai, over Bnei Israel. Now, what's amazing in all of this is, in order for this blessing really to be known, to be experienced, to all that, obedience and fulfillment is essential to receiving the blessing from the king. If you say you're going to do something, if you make a vow to the Lord and you don't do it, is that a big deal?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big deal. All right, so obedience is essential to receiving the blessing. And both the Nazirite and each tribe, they're bringing their gifts to the king. They're building that sense of trust. They're building that the consistent behavior in fulfilling the word. And the king is then in a position to receive these offerings. The king is then in a position to receive not just the offerings, but the vassals of those who are coming to pledge their lives to him. Because who is supposed to be their king? Isn't he supposed to be their king? When later on, when they are crying out for a king, and the prophet is so upset about the whole thing, he's like, look, don't worry about them rejecting you. They're not rejecting you. They are rejecting me, the Lord, as their king. Right? He is always supposed to be the one in charge. He is always supposed to be our king. And so he is, in presenting ourselves before him, we are, each tribe is submitting themselves, submitting their standard, their banner, to the banner of the Lord, the banner of the king. And this whole passage is also very similar in structure and form to the events of the book of Esther. When she comes in before the king, who is also her husband, right? She comes in and she submits herself to her king, and is her life in his hands? Yes. Very much so. And he, there's all these things of the court going on, and he turns his full attention toward her. He extends her that scepter of grace toward her and allows her to live. So, and this is a similar type of moment. As much as we think of this as just a blessing, I want you all to consider looking at this blessing as essentially a pledge of loyalty between loyalty and fidelity between a king and his subjects. It's very similar in this concept of what you would see, what happens when a person is knighted before a king. What do? When someone is brought before a king, they kneel, they offer up their sword or their shield or their banner of their crest of their house, and he comes in and bestows upon them, he knights them and all that other kind of stuff. This is what's happening, yes.
And interesting in that the king or the priest says the words. The vassal doesn't say the words are pronounced over the subject.
Mm-hmm. And that's very important because, as Hebrews 7 talks about, it is beyond dispute that the lesser is blessed by the greater. Right? As he is the one who is doing the blessing. He is the one who is doing the receiving of our statements of loyalty, and then he is responding and receiving and accepting those things from us. So I'm going to look through each of these, some of these important words in this. We were singing about this, Baruch Hu et Adonai. Comes from this word, Barak. It means to bless, but it also means to kneel. Right? And again, that whole ceremony about the knighting, you are kneeling before your king. It's also used in the sense of to invoke God, to praise, to celebrate, to adore, or to bless God. One of the lesser translations of this is that the word barak means to cause one to kneel. That you are making them kneel before you. And that's a significant thing, because that's essentially what's happening here. They are the people of God, the Nazarite, and in all of this they are submitting, they are kneeling before the Lord. And so you think about it in the sense of, may the Lord, and we're going through that passage, may the Lord cause you to kneel. You bend the knee to him, right? You bow before him. Right? We don't do that very much in our culture, do we? What is bowing? What is bending the knee a symbol of? Sign of submission, or it's a sign of humility, it's a sign of deference, of honor, respect. It's all of those things. I mean, that's why, we were, just a few years ago, everybody was kind of getting upset when the president was going and bowing to the king of Saudi Arabia, because that means something, especially to them. That means something. And how you bow, or the depth of which you bow, and all that other kind of stuff, all of that means something. It doesn't mean much to us, but it does to them. So the Lord causes us to kneel before him. That's the first part of it. And then the word keep is shamar. To keep, to guard, to observe, or give heed, to keep watch, and ward, or to protect, to observe, to celebrate, or keep. You were supposed to shamar, to guard the Sabbath, the covenant, or the commands. Or it's also, lo and behold, to perform a vow. What section did they just finish when they read this part? About the Nazirite vow. Okay, so it all fits together in that. It also has this idea of meaning to have charge of, or to have charge over. All right, so If the Lord is our shepherd, right? And I hope He's your shepherd, isn't He? If the Lord is our shepherd, He has charge over us, and He guards and He keeps watch over us. And so He leads us besides the still waters. He takes us on those paths of righteousness. Wherever He leads, that's where we're supposed to go, because He's the one who is in charge. He is the one who has charge over us. It is His responsibility. The one who is supposed to keep these things has all of that. So when we're asking, may the Lord cause you to bow before Him, because ultimately who has charge over you? He does. He is accepting, He is taking charge of us. He is accepting and receiving our bowing of the knee. He is accepting and receiving our pledge of loyalty to Him. You know, we first see this word shamar in Genesis chapter 2. It says, then Adonai Elohim took the man and gave him rest in the Garden of Eden in order to cultivate it and shamar, to watch over it. That's its usage. Its usage is connected to being the one who is guarding over, who is representing a greater Lord, right? Adam was not the Lord, but he was there as the one representing the Lord, and he was there in the garden representing the Lord, a greater Lord. So we are acting, Adam was then able to act in the authority of the greater king, because he had submitted himself to him. He was the vassal of the king. He was given that position and that place by the king to guard and protect the garden. Of course, how well did we do at that? Not so good. We didn't necessarily do that very well. The next major word in this, you know, may the Lord make His face to shine on you. It's or to be or become light, or to shine. You know, we were talking about the blessings a little while ago. He has commanded us to be the light of the world. Is it that we are the light? No. Where does the light come from? It comes from Him and through us. How does that work? Because we have submitted to Him. He shines upon us, and then we reflect that glory. He shines through us from that. So, it also means to become, to be illuminated, to become lighted up, to give light, like the sun, moon, and the stars, to lighten, like the lighten of the eyes. Have you ever seen somebody, they turn to something, they see it, and their eyes just kind of light up when they see somebody that they love, things like that. Then there's this idea of the idea of the face. It's panaim. It's what is interesting about it is face or faces. It's something that is a plural. And when you think about it, when you're going through life, how many faces do we have?
A lot.
We can have a lot of faces, right? We can put on a lot of personas. We can put on a lot of masks. You know, if you remember to school days, if you were in school and such, and you had that one teacher that had the look. She's got that look. Don't you, dear? And I'm getting that look. No, I'm not getting that look. But she's got that look. She had that look. She tells me about that look. But I remember teachers who have that look when you get out of line, and all of a sudden it just gets set. And it's like, oh, you fear for your life when you get that look, right? But we have a lot of faces in life, a lot of responsibilities, a lot of roles that we have to play in life. And many times when we think about having many faces, you can also think about it. How many know the word multitasking? What's happening when you're multitasking?
Doing many different things at once.
You're focusing on a lot of different things you try to do it at the same time. That's the idea. Oh yeah, I can multitask. And usually something happens, you know, it's usually you're almost playing the game of putting out the fire, because once you start ignoring this one, you focus on this one, then you have to turn over there and focus on this one. But while you're focused on this one, something's happening at the other end. So multitasking is very hard, but you're splitting your attention, you're splitting your face into different areas and different places. So in a lot of ways, this could be an idiom, this understanding of his face, an idiom for seeing someone's full identity. You're getting to see, without all the masks, without all the different roles, you're getting to see them for who they are, and they're showing their true self to you. But it also could be this an idiom for having their full and complete attention. Their focus is on you. It's a lot like the shepherd. He has a flock of 100 sheep. So he's got 99, or he's got 100 sheep that he has to keep his face focused on and attention given to. But what happens when one goes astray? He leaves the 99 and focuses all his attention on finding the one. Yes?
Well, when you look at the context of what it is, when the Lord make his face, and his faces are plural, a statement could be argued there about the triunity there, or
yes, you could.
The many different aspects that he has. But then going what you were saying of, do we have one face or many faces? It's largely an Eastern concept, although it is in the Middle Eastern world as well. The idea that one has 3 different faces. You have one face you show to the world, 2 to your closest family and friends, and 1 that you are only really able to understand yourself. So even in that sort of concept, there's just sort of like the 3 sort of iterations of the same face.
And we were talking on the way here about how some of the rabbis, when they look at these things, especially in connection to the face in another passage, but that they connect this as when you see the face of the Lord, when Moses talks to him face to face, he's seeing the face of Mashiach, he's seeing the face of Messiah. And that's the face that he sees, and that's what he talks to. So, but seeing the face of the Lord is a big deal, right? When you look at Exodus chapter 33, thought I had on that. Exodus 33 says, Adonai answered Moses. He's already been talking to him face to face. That was in a previous passage, an earlier passage. But he says, I will also do what you've said, for you have found favor or grace in my sight, and I know you by name. Then he said, please show me your glory. So he said, I will cause all my goodness to pass before you and call out the name of Adonai before you. I will be gracious toward whom I will be gracious, and I will have mercy on whom I will be merciful. But he also said, you cannot see my face, for no man can see me and live. Right? There is no way. Yes, you have spoken to me face to face, but I did not turn all of my faces toward you. I did not focus all of my attention upon you. I did not reveal everything of who I am to you. Because if I had done that, guess what? You'd be dead. Right? So may the Lord make his face to shine upon you is a big deal. You're wanting him to reveal himself, to show himself, show his glory, his light to us. It also goes on in Deuteronomy. This is one of the challenges. Did I lose it? I don't know why it's taking so long. But Deuteronomy 31, this is one of those issues of what happens when we are disobedient. Remember I said earlier that in order to experience the blessing, obedience is essential to experiencing his blessing. But it says, Adonai said to Moses, behold, you are about to lie down with your fathers. Then this people will rise up and prostitute themselves with the foreign gods of the land they are entering. They will abandon me, and they will break my covenant that I cut with them. Then my anger will flare against them on that day, and I will abandon them and do what? Hide my face. I'm going to hide my face from them. So they will be devoured, and my many evils and troubles will come on them. They will say on that day, isn't it because God is not among us that all these evils have come on us? And I will surely hide my face on that day because of all the evil they have done, for they have turned to other gods. All right? The hiding of the face for here and here is because they are breaking his covenant. So obedience is essential to experience the blessing of the king, and one of those is the shining, his face shining upon you. That is a blessing. It's always intended to be a blessing. But and then consider this: what about Messiah? Sometimes we have those perspectives, and it's one of those things that's always taught that when Messiah was on the cross and he said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" that the Lord turned his back and turned his face away. Have y'all heard that one? I definitely grew up hearing that. But that implies what? For the Lord to turn his face away from Messiah, the primary reason why he would do something like that is the breaking of the covenant. Does Messiah break the covenant? No. He's fulfilling it all. And that makes what we see in Psalm 22. I don't know why it's taking so long. For some reason this is very sluggish today. There we go. For he has not despised or disdained the suffering of the lowly one. Of course, who's that talking about? It's Messiah. This is one of those passages about that. He says, "Nor has he hidden his face from him, but when he cried to him, he heard." So, why would God never turn his face from Messiah? Because Messiah has never broken covenant with him. All right? So it's one of those things that he is not turning away from him for what he's doing. He's turning, he's keeping, he is fulfilling even that Psalm 22, which is a great picture and a powerful picture of the crucifixion. The next word in that blessing is gracious. May he his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. It's the word chanan. To be gracious, to show favor or pity, to be shown consideration, to bend or stoop in kindness to an inferior. Remember, the greater is the one who blesses the lesser. And we read about in Exodus 33 how he will be gracious to whom he will be gracious. He's the one in control. He's the one in authority to say what's that's going to happen. It's also in the sense of to make gracious or to make favorable. So the one in charge is stooping in kindness to the inferior. We have humbled ourselves before him, and he is showing us that consideration. He's showing us that favor as the one who is in charge to the inferior. But he is also, it also implies the actions that the one in charge, the actions that the king takes in order to see the characteristics within you. Because when the knight or somebody comes before the king, there are certain behaviors that are allowed and not allowed. It's the code of the chivalry and all that. Y'all have heard some of those before? The chivalry code is saying you are pledging yourself to loyalty to the king, but also you're going to live a certain way as his representative. That's what the covenant really is all about. You are agreeing to live by the standards that the king has set out. And so he is making you, he is in charge of you, and so he is then telling you how to live, and he is going to ensure that those characteristics are lived out in you. He is being gracious to you and making these things come about. This word gracious is the root of where we get the word chen, or grace, or favor. It also has the idea of acceptance. You know, it's first used in Genesis chapter 6, verse 8, where Noah found favor or grace in the eyes of the Lord, right? And that allowed him to survive what was coming in judgment. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among his generation. The characteristics that God was looking for was found in him. Right? So he had experienced that grace. It's also related to that. It's within the same family, the same spelling and such to a degree as the Chai, where we get the word life. It's living. Our life, we have no life if we don't have His grace. Right? It's talking about things that are like green vegetation. It's also flowing fresh water. You see that one in Genesis 1:20. Let the waters swarm with living creatures. So it's both things are alive. You've got living creatures here, but also it's as if the water is also alive. And of course, what does Yeshua talk about? Out from you springs of living water. All right, that's the Chai. Ma'im Chaim. Yes, exactly. So that's all there as a part of that. So grace is connected to the idea of life. The next one is the word to lift. It's the nasa, to lift or bear up, to carry or to take, to carry, support, to sustain or endure. It also has the idea of taking or taking away, carrying off, removing a burden from you. His burden it's not heavy, is it?
Easy.
It's an easy. It's light, right? So He lifts us up. He bears us. He sustains us. He takes away our guilt. He will lift us up. He will carry you. He will support and sustain you with every provision. And of course, that's what the king was supposed to do. When you as the vassal, when you as the knight come and you pledge your loyalty, you bow the knee to the king, he is saying, I am going to provide for you what you need in order to fulfill the role that I give you. And so he becomes responsible for all of that. This one's first usage is in Genesis chapter 4, verse 13, with Cain, where he says, my punishment is too great for me to carry, to bear. All right, it's this nasa. So it is something that it is too much for Cain. It would require forgiveness. It would require that being lifted off of him. But because Cain, he was not really bowing the knee to the Lord in presenting his offering. Something about what he was doing, something about what he was offering was not acceptable to the king. His heart was not really in the offering he was making. For whatever reason, and I know there's lots of speculation about that, but Cain was not really bowing the knee to the king. And so his burden remained. His burden of unforgiveness remained. It's also interesting that in looking up and talking about some of these things, some in the conspiracy worlds say that NASA, where we get NASA, they'll say that NASA comes from the word nasha, when it's the Hebrew word for deceive. That's where they go in the conspiracy world of things. But this one is actually, if there is a parallel between NASA and something in Hebrew, this one's a whole lot better of the idea of to lift up. Because what is the whole purpose of NASA? They're going off into space. So if there is a connection between NASA and something in Hebrew, it's not deceive, it's lifting up. So I just thought that I would share that. The idea of face is in here again. He is gracious to you. He's shining on you. He's being gracious to you. May He turn His face toward you. There's that part again. And again, we've already talked about that. And then the next word, may he give you, or may he grant you. This word is sum. That means to put, to place, to set, to appoint, or to make. It's also talked in the sense of to put in place, to plant, or to fix them as like a station or a standard or a banner in that position. It also has the meaning of being making or transforming into, to fashion, to work them into a certain place or position. Again, we've already talked about some similar concepts with that. But it also has the idea of to set or make for a sign, as a representation, that you are granted a position, you are granted a title, you are granted a representation of who? You are then granted and set in position to make a declaration about the king that you are pledging your loyalty to. Its first usage was in Genesis chapter 2, verse 8. He says, there he placed or put the man, fixed the man that he had formed. And again, Adam's role in the garden, what was he supposed to do? He was supposed to be there and have dominion, have authority in the garden as a representative of God himself, right? It's when he failed in that duty, it's when he broke in that covenant that he lost that ability to be in that role. So he was set there, he was put there, placed there as a sign to represent the king. And then of course the last word, I don't know why this thing's going so slow, is to give you shalom, give you peace. Most of us are pretty familiar with this one, but it also means, it's completeness, it's soundness, it's again the idea of welfare, or that he is provided for you. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, or I lack nothing. It comes from the word shalom, which means to be in a covenant of peace or to be at peace. So even in the midst of the concept of shalom is the idea of you're in covenant together. That is not something that is broken. So you are complete, you are sound, you are in right relationship with. It also means to make whole or good, to restore, or even to make compensation. This word shalom, also the King James translates it as, to pay, 19, peace, 11 times. But notice how many times it's the recompense, reward, render, restore. How many times it's about giving something or making something back that was lost. All right? That's so much of what is at the heart of shalom. Why can we not have shalom? Because we are we complete or incomplete in our sin? We're incomplete. We're still broken. We are not sound. We can't be at peace because we have not been made whole. And so much of what this idea, we're not in covenant with him, but so much of this is about being restored to what he wants us to be and what he originally created us to be. So when you think about this as this is kind of the summation of all of this. This is really just kind of been on my mind and my heart this week. About the king's blessing. That the Lord calls you to kneel before him and he will take charge of you. All right? So these are some of those secondary translations of things. But that the Lord will cause you to kneel before him and take charge of you. That the Lord will allow you to see his face and let you live. Right? Be gracious to you. He's going to let you live. He's going to do all of that. That the Lord will let you bear or carry his face, his identity, his image, and appoint or establish or make you into a sign, into an agent, representation of him, a representation, an agent of peace, of restoration. Or another way of putting it is that, or he will restore you once again as his representative. Because remember, all of this is connected to the garden. All of this is connected to the garden. This is what's so amazing in this passage, in this picture of this blessing, of this bowing the knee of fidelity, of offering and pledging ourselves to him. You know, the Father wants to bless his people and have us be in submission to him, have us to kneel before him. That is his heart. That is his desire. It also tells us that the Father wants to receive that pledge of loyalty. He wants to see us in obedience to him, to fulfill our vows, to provide to make an offering before him. He wants to see us receive our pledge of loyalty to him so that he can take charge over us. He actually wants to be King and Lord of our lives. Doesn't he deserve it? And then the Father wants to reveal his face to us and let us live. There's so much about it, who he is, that he can't show us right now because we could not handle it. But this is his heart. He wants to be able to hold nothing back from us. He doesn't want to have to hide who he is or have different faces, so to speak. Then the Father also wants to elevate us or to restore us to our position, to lift us up as the Nasa, as the position of honor as his representatives, those who are faithfully bearing his image, who are bearing his face. Because aren't we all created in his image? Right? He wants to have all of these things be made manifest in his people. And so when we see this show up in the New Testament, James chapter 4 says, therefore submit to God. You know, bend the knee, bow the knee to him. You resist the devil and he will flee from you. Okay, the enemy is not going to be a part of your life. But then also, just a couple of verses later, you humble yourselves in the sight of Adonai, and he does what? He lifts you up. Again, this is pointing back to the blessing, the king's blessing. And lifted up. You know, aren't there other examples of people being lifted up in Scripture? Wasn't Enoch taken up to heaven? Wasn't Elijah, wasn't Yeshua lifted up? Right? All of them, because they had given their lives to him, they found favor with the Lord, they were obedient to him, they were in covenant with him. Because of all of those things, they were lifted up in due time, when the time was right, in the appropriate moment. So we are supposed to be those ones that be elevated and restored to that position of honor as his representative. And that is also how it's talked about in 1 Corinthians chapter 6. Look at the position that we are given as his people. Don't you know that the Kedoshim, the holy ones, the saints, will judge the world? All right? And if the world is to be judged by you, are you incompetent to judge in trivial matters? In other words, this is what you're going to be able to do. This is what the position you're going to be restored to. Why can't you take care of some things here on earth right now, amongst yourselves? That's the issue that he's talking about. He says, don't you know that we will even judge angels? I don't know exactly what all that entails and what all that means. But we're being elevated to a position that we don't currently have. And it's something that he intended for us to have. Is how much more the matters of this life. You see it again in 2 Corinthians. He says, therefore, if anyone is in Messiah, he is a new creation. The old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. Now all these things are from God, who reconciled us to himself through Messiah and He gave us a ministry. He appointed us a position, a role, a function, which we had lost. He gave us the ministry of reconciliation, of bringing it all back and to what it was supposed to be. Somehow or another, we are supposed to be a part of that process. He says, that is, in Messiah, God was reconciling the world to Himself, not counting their trespasses against them, and He has entrusted the message of reconciliation to us. Right? He is elevating us to a position of status, a position of representing Him to this world. And He says, we are therefore ambassadors for Messiah, as though God were making His appeal through us. This is how Adam was supposed to be in the garden. Adam was an ambassador of Messiah, an ambassador of God, ruling and having dominion over, taking charge of the garden in the position that God had given him. And so we are ambassadors of Messiah with this message that He is wants to restore it all if you will come and submit to Him, if you will come and bow the knee to Him. And He will receive you by the blood of Messiah, because you are no longer broken. You have been made a new creature, a new creation. So God is making His appeal through us. We beg you on behalf of Messiah that to be reconciled to God. So when you think about the King's blessing, this is the question, this is the things that we have to put out there. Are you willing to pledge your loyalty to the King? Are you willing to be restored to your post, essentially, as a guardian of the garden and the kingdom of God? Are you willing to essentially be knighted unto Him, to serve as an ambassador, to serve as His representative, to speak for, to represent the kingdom of God? That's what this blessing is calling us to. Because as we see, in this way, they are to place my name over them. We're no longer just standing up for our own banner. You know, the Israelites were camping behind their own standard, their own banner. Those banners submit to Him. Right? That's why you see in state houses and things in the country, you know, there's the United States flag. The rest of the flags are not supposed to be at the same level as the other. Only Texas is supposed to, but you know, that's an exception that's made. But everything else is submission to that greater thing. We have essentially a new name that is supposed to be written on our heart. So we don't just rally behind our particular tribal banner, our particular nation, or whatever else. We have a new standard. Yahweh Nisi, the Lord our banner. He is the one that we now stand behind. He is the one that we now fight for. Our identity has been changed. And of course, in Revelation, that's what we're told that we're given. We're given a stone that has a new name on it. All of this is connected. And all of it is there. So are you willing, as we, reading that blessing, to realize that it is a pledge of loyalty and fidelity to the King?